In their trouble, they cried to Adonai, and he rescued them from their distress. He silenced the storm and stilled its waves, and they rejoiced as the sea grew calm. Then he brought them safely to their desired port. Amen, amen, and amen. And now we will go to our midrash on Hebrews. On Hebrews. So, as you know, we had trouble with Facebook. So we're doing this on YouTube, and I hope that this will record. But in case it's not, I will ask somebody like Audrey. Make sure to keep a recording at least of this part, because all these Hebrew classes are posted on our Yedidei Adonai. They're posted as standalone classes on the Yedidei Adonai web page,
Patreon,
as well as Patreon. So. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to have a recording of that. So Audrey, if you hear me, please try to do something, your magic there to record it. Thank you. Okay, so here is my papers. Abba Father, be with us as we go over these passages. So in our Parasha readings today, we address the issue of discipleship, how discipleship is a higher calling, is a high calling. It lays at that distinction of being disciples, lays at our feet higher standards that we need to be aware of. The way Yeshua defined discipleship was almost like priests. That's why I chose those verses. So, but in his letter to the troubled first century Israeli disciples, our author reminds his readers, the congregation, of their discipleship standard. It reminds them, hey, you are disciples of the great master. Act like it. He tells them, like Paul told the Corinthians, and again, I don't know if it's Paul who wrote the epistle. If it's not him, it might be his cousin, because it's very Pauline-like. In 1 Corinthians 16:13, Paul says, and I'm reading from the King James Version, he says, "Watch ye, stand fast in the faith. Quit you like man, be strong." I like how it says in this English, quit you like man. You know, that's what he tells them. But of course, he's talking to both man and woman. The word man there is a idiom. He says, quit you like man. So today the writer of the book of Hebrew is telling the people, quit you like man, be strong. I know it's tough. So what? Quit you like man. You know. The author is like King David when he kicks himself in the rear end in the right direction, commanding his own spirit to look up instead of down, when he says in Psalms 103 verse 2, "Bless the Lord, O my soul." It's an imperative voice in this verb. It's a commandment. It's a command that he gives himself to. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits. It's easy when we go through difficult times and problems, to whine and complain. But those are the time when we need to apply. Bless the Lord, O my soul. Give ourselves a kicking in the rear by blessing the Lord, not forgetting all his benefits. I heard somebody said one time, you can't praise and complain at the same time. It's impossible. You either praise or you complain. To look terrible. What kind of praise will be? Lord, things are so bad. I don't like it. It doesn't work. Either your mouth is either down or up. It's like King David knew that. That's why he told himself, bless the Lord, O my soul. Forget not all his benefits. When we feel, I would just sit down and think, look at all this. God's done this and done that. And I remember that time. Oh, yeah, that's what we got to do when things go bad. We don't go, well, I wish it was different. That's really not fair. We need to bless the Lord and forget not all his benefits. That's what King David says. And as disciples, we are like Levites. As disciples, we are like Levites for the people. We have a higher calling. Disciples are like soldiers. I heard it said one time, and I don't know how it was said, probably much better than I will say it, but I heard it said that soldiers deny themselves the freedom that they fight for in order for us to have it. Soldiers, they don't live, when they're in the barracks and in the war, they don't live in a democracy. The general or the officer doesn't come and say, okay, we think we should go to war. What do you think? Let's have a vote. We think you should do more push-ups. You know what? Let's have a vote about more training, No. Soldier lives in the dictatorship of their commanding officers. They deny themselves the freedom that they fight for in order for us to have it. That's what disciples are. That's what Levites do too. They renege the freedoms that they could have as regular Israelites so others can have it. You remember what we read? They don't have any possession in Israel. They don't have any land. Their only inheritance is Hashem. That's it. Hashem and his service. They can't marry who they want. They can't talk the way they want. They can't do what they want. They're not their own. They belong to the Lord. And this is exactly what we're told by Paul. We are not our own. Like Levites. Someone's got to do it. Soldiers are on a mission. So they don't whine about their quarters, their clothing, their hairstyle requirements, or at least they shouldn't. Maybe they do, but maybe they should. Really, they shouldn't. They don't because they live for something higher than their freedoms and personal wants. You see, they live for something higher than their own freedoms and personal wants. That's what we're supposed to do. You see, that's what Paul tells the congregation. That's what our author tells the Hebrew guy. He says, come on, look up. Stop looking down. Look up. It's like firefighters who also put their lives in danger to save ours. They also have requirements concerning clothing and appearances. They can't grow a beard like this because they have to be able to put the mask. Some places they can't have tattoos. They have to have a certain appearance. That has to do with their job, with their mission, their calling. When you do that, you live for something higher than your own desires and wants. You live for something better than your own freedoms. You let go of them. That's discipleship. A disciple of the Master lives for something higher than his own dreams or desires for freedom and personal happiness. He is a soldier who reneges his own rights that others may live theirs. This is really important to realize. We have a role, we have a mission. We live for the establishment of the kingdom of God on earth. That's more important than what I want, you know. Here's something from Paul about the freedoms and rights of a disciple. It's from 1 Corinthians 9. 1 Corinthians 9 was written because Paul was challenging the Corinthians with the same types of ideas. To let go, it was challenging them to let go of their debauchery lifestyle, which they actually called freedom. In the text, you can read it. He was asking them to let go of their own lifestyles in order to adopt a Torah lifestyle. They were not happy about it. So in a very human reaction, they tried to shoot the messenger. They tried to find fault with Paul. I won't read the whole chapter, just the essence. I don't want to read the whole chapter now, just the essence. But one day we can do a class on Corinthians. It's quite amazing. Paul starts his defense in 1 Corinthians 9, 1. Am I not free? He says, I'm reading from the ESV. Am I not free? Am I not free? Am I not an apostle? Don't I have a great position? Have I not seen Yeshua our Lord? You remember in Acts 9? He had a vision. He can claim, hey, look, I've got this. I've got the master behind me. He showed himself to me. He didn't show himself to you. So he said, hey, look, you guys. Are you not my workmanship in the Lord? He says, hey, you guys owe me. You today know, he was telling them, you today know who is the God of heaven and earth because I came and told you. And I did it at great cost, expense, and sacrifices, and even persecution. So, hey, you owe me. Basically, that's what he was saying. If to others I am not an apostle, at least I am to you. Can't deny that, he's telling them. For you are the seal of my apostleship in the Lord. So basically, nobody can tell me I didn't do my job. Look, I see you. You're learning the Torah and everything. You are. And it's because I came and taught you. So, hey, you are my seal, the seal of my apostleship to the Lord. You're the fruit of my labor, he says. Verse 3. This is my defense to those who would examine me. He's going to start laying it on thick. Here we go. Do we not have the right to eat and drink? I can eat what I want. I can drink what I want, when I want. Do we not have the right to take along a believing wife, as do other apostles and the brother of the Lord and Cephas? So James was married and Peter was married. Or is it only Barnabas and I who have no rights to refrain from working for a living? So he says, we're making this mission of teaching our main occupation. I could be making tents and getting rich. Barnabas was a rich man. He shared all of his money to the congregation in Israel. Why? Don't we have the right to live for ourselves also? You see, for the sake of the important work of the kingdom, Paul and Barnabas lived Spartan lifestyles. Spartan lifestyles. They lived like soldiers, letting go of the many things and comforts of life so they could do a better job. They even forwent financial ambitions. Then he explains what he's saying by giving a military analogy. He says, who serves as a soldier at his own expense? He was comparing the soldiers, in those days, Roman and Greek soldiers. You join the army, they take care of you. The army is going to feed you. Then he's going to give a farmer analogy. Sorry. Who plants a vineyard without eating any of its fruit? Then he's going to give a herder analogy, or who tends a flock without getting some of the milk. He's covering all the bases, everybody. He knows who he's got in the congregation. Did we get everybody? Let's see. Though he received gifts from other people, you see, he actually refused. He's saying these things because though he received gifts from other people, he refused to receive money from the congregation. He refused to receive a salary from the congregation he ministered to. And then in the text, if you read it yourself, he took his example from Moshe and from Samuel, who also used the same defense when accused of wrong by the people. Moshe was accused one time, and he says, "Have I taken anything from you?" Samuel did the same thing when they rejected him. He said, "Have I taken anything from you?" I replied for my own self, "I don't owe you nothing." That's what he did. So Paul is doing the same thing. He's following Moshe, Samuel. He says, "Have I taken anything from you? I owe you nothing. Well, what you coming to me for?" Then in the text, he talks about how he could claim money, but doesn't. We will read further. After making a point of his right as a person, he says, verse 15, "I have made no use of any of these rights." He makes a point. You have to read it yourself. I didn't want to write the whole thing. But he makes mention of his rights, but then he says, "I have made no use of my rights as a person, even as a disciple. For I would rather die than have everyone deprive me of my ground for boasting." He prided himself in the fact that he was dedicated. He didn't try to get something from it. He wanted to give the mostest. He was proud of it. Whatever what he means by my ground for boasting is that if I do something and I get the reward, then what glory do I have? Yeshua said. But if I do something and don't get rewarded, wow, that's precious. That's what he says. "I would rather die than have anyone deprive me of my ground for boasting. For if I preach the good news, that gives me no ground for boasting. For necessity is laid upon me. Woe unto me if I don't preach the good news." Basically, he's saying, I deserve nothing for what I do. Yeah, I give everything, but yet that's only my reasonable service. I deserve nothing. It's like we serve, we do what we do as parents, as disciples, but we deserve nothing. We don't deserve, we're just doing our reasonable service. We don't deserve an applause. We don't deserve, it's nice, but really we don't deserve it. Only God does. Whatever we do, we only do our reasonable service. Then he gives another analogy. We didn't cover everybody. He gives an athlete analogy. He says, "Do you not know," that's in verse 24, "do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it." If you're a runner, if you're an athlete, if you want to win, you're gonna have to make some sacrifice. You don't eat what you want. If you're an athlete, they're gonna tell you what to eat. They're gonna tell you about your schedule because you need training. They're gonna tell you even what to do for exercise. And the more you obey these things, the more you work hard, the more you take it upon yourself to do it. That's how you win. Not by saying, "Well, I want to do what I want to do. Come on." It all depends what kind of vision have we got. And then he says, verse 25, "Every athlete exercises self-control in all things." These are analogies for a disciple. Why? He says, every athlete exercises self-control in all things. Verse 25 says, why? They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. So you look at an athlete, all the self-sacrifices he makes to just get a perishable wreath. Everybody go, yeah, that's what you want. That's it, done. What we get is an unperishable wreath. Wow. A wreath. A wreath. W-R-E-A-T-H. You know, the wreath. So what he's trying to say here is if they are willing to live disciplined lives for things that perish, how much more should we be willing to do the same and even more for things that are eternal? That's what he's saying. He said it, not me. Verse 26 of 1 Corinthians 9. So I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air. Here now boxing. We had a runner, now we have a boxing analogy. Verse 27, but I discipline my body and keep it under control, lest after preaching to others I should find myself disqualified. He's talking about the discipline of a disciple for the kingdom of heaven. Should be higher than that of a worker who wants to do good at his job. Should be better than that of an athlete. Should be better than that of a soldier who works for kingdom on earth. We work for the kingdom of heaven. Come on. That's awesome. The same guy who's teaching the Corinthians is the one who said that verse that we talked about last week, Romans 5:3-5. He says, we rejoice in our sufferings. Yes, we rejoice. Yes, suffering, great. That's what he said. We rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance. Endurance produces character. Character produces hope. We have to learn something. We work hard and it's tiring and everything. But after we feel, wow, I learned something. Wow, awesome. He says, and character produces hope, and hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured. When we have that hope, we know that it's a result of God's love being poured into our hearts through his Holy Spirit, who he has given us. James said the same thing in James 1:2-4. He says, count it all joys, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. So, yeah, what trials of various kinds? Yeah, joy. That's what he says, not me. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. Same thing in other words. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect, complete, lacking in nothing. This is why this author in the letter to the Hebrew, this is why he's telling them, come on, yeah, we're going through it, but yeah, but okay, but what else is new? I'm wondering, is there something in those passages from Paul, Peter, or James that gives us guidance on how we should react to our present situation? Just a thought. Now let's return to the discipleship lesson, the pep talk given to the first century Israeli disciples. Last time we finished with showing how the renewed covenant in Yeshua, according to the promises made to David in Psalm 110, that covenant was better than that of Moshe because it stood on higher premises than the one given at Mount Horeb. Now, if this is the first time you listen to this, I really suggest you go to our Yedidei Adonai website. You go to the tab called Video, and there you can listen to the previous sessions because these chapters, they build on each other. So if you get lost, you're going to have to go back to listen to those. Today, we'll start on Hebrews 9:16. For where a will is involved, the death of the one who made it must be established. So he was talking about a covenant, now he's talking about a will. Did we miss something? Well, what's happening, like we're starting on verse 16, but really we're in the middle of a conversation and we're getting lost in the translation. Because the word will, in the King James Version, they use the word testament. Now, a testament, when we say Old or New Testament, the word testament is also used as a will, somebody who died. But in Hebrew, the word brit, covenant, covers the whole thing. A brit can be a testament, can, in this context, a testament, a will, a covenant. So even though the English uses different words, it's the same thing. It's continuing. So in the establish of a covenant, it's like saying, where there is a covenant, the death of one made it to be has to be established. It's the same word. So English made it a little bit more. A will or a testament is a contract. It's a covenant. In a will or a testament, you say, well, upon my death, I bequeath all my debts to so and so, right? So it's a will, it's a covenant, it's a brit, a will. A testament is a brit that is written defining the will of a person who died. So in Hebrew, you can use the same words. So 9:16, Hebrews 9:16 can say, where there is a brit, a will, a brit, where a will or brit is involved, the death of one who made it must be established, because this don't happen until you die. The signing of a brit, of the establishing of an important contract, was done with blood. Didn't have to be something that you died for, that you die, but it was signed with blood. Therefore, it required the death of an innocent animal. Let's look at some examples, because he's going to talk about it later in the chapter. So I put some examples here of how a covenant is established through the death of an animal. Let's go first to Noah, who offered a sacrifice. To Noah, who offered a sacrifice. In Genesis 8:20, we read, it was after the flood. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord and took some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird and offering on the altar. Then Genesis 9:8 and 9 says, then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, behold, I establish my covenant with you and your offspring after you. So animals died. That's how you did a covenant in those days. Animal died. That's how you did a covenant. And the fact that this covenant that God made with Noah, okay? Noah, all the generation from Adam has disappeared in the flood. So Noah is really the father of the one who covers all of humanity. And Noah, in this, if you read in the contract, this contract that God made with Noah, the father of all of us today, really, was a contract about the knowledge of God. You can read it yourself. In Genesis, it says, you shall not do idols, you shall blah, blah, blah. It's a contract for serving God. And Jewish people still honor this contract today. There is what's called the Noahide laws. That are the laws for basically people who are non-Jewish. The laws of God for people who are non-Jewish. Actually, a non-Jew who loves the God of Israel is called a son of Noah, a Noahide. And those are a lot of these people that Paul witnessed to in Southeast Asia. We'll talk about it when we have a class on the book of Acts. So this is an example. Then we have Abraham in Genesis 15:8 and 9. Abraham says, "O Lord God, how am I to know that I shall possess?" God took him on a mountain, showed him the whole thing. He told him, "Look, that's going to be yours." Well, how do I know that? And Hashem said to him, bring me a heifer 3 years old, a female goat 3 years old, a ram 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. There was a list there. And 16, Genesis 15, 17, and 18, when the sun had gone down, it was dark. Behold, a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch passed between the pieces. On that day the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, to your offspring I gave this land from the river of Egypt to the great river of Euphrates. So what happened there? He asked him to bring these animals, and he cut them in two, and he says, the lambs. What happened in those days, it's called the Nusi type of covenant, the Nusi covenant that was done in these areas. When you made a treaty with somebody else, you took an animal or two or three, whatever, and you cut it in half and you laid them on the ground, and the two parties weaved through these animals. It's a bit like saying, may God do that to me, what was done to these animals if I break this covenant. And then they met. Here, Abraham was making a covenant with God. God was making a covenant with Abraham. So God sent a lamp, a flaming torch of fire is described, to play his part in the covenant. But the fact remains, animals died for this covenant. And until this day, actually, this covenant in Judaism is still adhered to, is still honored. Today, when a non-Jewish person wants to convert, not to just participate in Jewish festivals because they love God of Israel, when somebody wants to convert to Judaism, they become sons of Abraham. This is why when we have Torah service, they become sons of Abraham because of that, because God told Abraham, in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. So this is why when we have Torah service and somebody who comes up to read from the Torah, who is Jewish, well, I say so-and-so, son of so-and-so. But if he's not Jewish, I say so-and-so, son of Abraham. The Bible made a difference between those actual converts to Judaism and those who were not. In the Bible, an actual convert to Judaism would have been the Ethiopian in Acts 7. And a son of Noah would have been Cornelius in Acts 10. So, but suffice it to say that to do this covenant, blood was shed, the blood of an animal. And in the case of Abraham, there was an added issue. It was blood is shed through the ritual of the circumcision given to all of Abraham's descendants. So now we're going to go back to Hebrews. In 9:16, he says, when you have a covenant, somebody died. Okay. Now we're going to go to Hebrews 9:17. For a will/covenant takes effect only at death, since it is not in force as long as the one who made it is alive. Therefore, not even the first covenant was inaugurated without blood. Now he's talking about with Moshe. Look, I'm going to give you the text. It's in Exodus 24, verses 1 through 8. It says, then he said to Moshe, come up to the Lord, you and Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel, and worship from afar. Moses alone shall come near me to the Lord, but the others shall not come near, and the people shall not come up with him. Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord and all the rules. And all the people answered with one voice and said, all the word that the Lord has spoken we will do. And Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord. He rose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain, and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent young men of the people of Israel who offered burnt offering and sacrificed peace offering of oxen to the Lord. And Moses took half of the blood and put it in basins, and half of the blood he threw against the altar. Then he took the book of the covenant and read it in the hearing of the people, and they said, all that the Lord has spoken we will do, and we will be obedient. And Moses took the blood and threw it on the people, and said, Behold, the blood of the covenant has made with you, that the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words. So that's what he's saying here in 9:17, 9:18, Hebrews 9:18. Not even the first covenant was inaugurated without blood. That's what he's talking about. Hebrews 9:19. For when every commandment of the Torah had been declared by Moshe unto all the people, he took the blood of calves and goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop, and sprinkled both the book itself and all the people, saying, This is the blood of the covenant God has commanded for you. So we read the story. He's just referring to that exact story, to that exact event. It's not a story. 9:21. Hebrews 9:21. And in the same way he sprinkled with the blood both the tent and all the vessels used in worship. You can read the text in Exodus 22. Indeed, under the law, almost everything is purified with blood. Under the Torah instructs us to purify things with blood. And without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sin. So, now he's talking about forgiveness of sin, shedding of blood. It's like all the offerings that have to do with guilt and shame, and also the Tamid offering that's morning and evening. Those have to do with sins. So they happen with the shedding of blood. Hebrew 9:23. Thus it was necessary. Now he's gonna midrash now. Thus it was necessary for the copies of heavenly things to be purified with these rites. So if you remember last week we saw how how the writer says that the Levitical service that is done with the altar and the blood is a copy of heavenly realities. It's a temporal copy of heavenly reality. That's what he said last week. So if you want to go read, you can read it in the text, or you can listen to the class. So Hebrews 9:23. Thus it was necessary for the copies of heavenly things, the earthly Levitical service, to be purified with these rites. But the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than this. So if the copy on earth has to be purified, that means that since they are just a shadow, a copy of something in heaven, that means there is a purification of that one in heaven. There is a service in heaven that requires purification. This is like just logic. And we talked about that last week, so I'm not going to go into that again. So he says again, 9:23, it was necessary for the copies of heavenly things to be purified with these rites, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. So he's going to tell us now how the heavenly original from which the earthly models is made. He's going to tell us now how the heavenly original has its purification. And he says in Hebrew 9:24, Messiah has entered not into the holy places made with hand, which are copies of true things, but into heaven itself, not to appear in the presence of God on our behalf, nor was it to offer himself repeatedly as the high priest enters the holy place every year with blood not of his own. And again, last week we talked about Hebrews 8 and 9, when he talked about the tabernacles, where the priest enters in the first chamber, then the second chamber, the priest, the high priest, enters once a year. I hope you remember we talked about that. So if these are copies of reality, so there's at the bottom, the reality above, there is somebody who goes into the first chamber, and Yeshua is the one who enters into the second chamber. And then he says, he enters not into holy places made with hands, which are copies of true things, but into heaven itself now to appear in the presence of God on our behalf. Nor was it to offer himself repeatedly as the high priest enters the holy place every year with blood not of his own. The high priest has to offer for himself before he goes in there, Again, last week we talked about it. Verse 26, but then he would have had to suffer repeatedly since the foundation of the world. But as it is, he has appeared once for all at the end of the age. Notice that the time of Yeshua marks the end of the age. It's a long ending, but it's still the end of the age. It's what's called the last days, not the latter days, the last days. At the end of the age, to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. And just as it is appointed for man to die once, and after that comes judgment, well, we all know that. We all know that. We die once. We don't die 3, 4, 5 times. So Yeshua, as a human being, he dies once. It was like a thing, and after that, we wait for a certain time until the judgment comes. Paul says nobody goes to that place of judgment before anybody. We all get there together. So even Yeshua in his human body, he can only die once. So, and that had to do also in those days, just like you have today, you had some civilizations that believe in reincarnation. So that was a statement that was, it was a religious statement. Hey, we believe that we only die once. We don't have reincarnation. Today there are still some civilizations who believe that. And then 9:28, Hebrews 9:28. So Messiah, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time. So he's telling us what that means. He will appear a second time, not to deal with sin this time, but to save those who are eagerly waiting for him. And if you read really the whole Yom Kippur ritual in Exodus. Also, I think there's some in Numbers. It's like you read the high priest goes in and everybody waits with bated breath. And then he comes out and everybody goes, yay! The priest went in and he didn't get killed like the sons of Aaron. He's been accepted. That priest, he put his life on the line, that high priest. He's doing something. If God's not happy, So when he comes out, all the people shout, yeah! And he blesses the people and everything, Same thing, Yeshua goes in, and one day he's going to come back. And we're all going to go, yeah! Same thing. The whole Yom Kippur ritual is beautiful. It's a skit. So you can see that unless you really understand Leviticus, Exodus, and you have a working knowledge of Judaism and of this Leviticus and Exodus, we really cannot understand Hebrews. And I would dare say it's the same thing with the whole Brit. Unless we have a working knowledge of Judaism, and Jewish rituals, and the Torah, we don't understand the Brit. At least not as much as we should. So, and as usual, our writer is going to theologize like a lawyer, He always does that. He doesn't say, well, I believe this because I believe it. I really feel it deep down in my heart. No. He's gonna give us proof text of everything. It's like a lawyer in court. You cannot go and say, well, I think he did it because I just have a hunch. It doesn't work. You gotta have some documentation. It's got to be strong evidence for it to be valid. Same thing. He does the same thing. So he writes, he theologizes like a lawyer, proof texting everything with Torah documentation. It's a good example of how we should also understand doctrine and people who teach things to us. We need to be able to, those people who teach need to be able to do the same thing. You know, you're going to teach Yeshua is the Messiah of the Jews. Okay, how do you see that? And here we go. You know, not because I feel it in my heart. That's good, but that's not enough. It's a good example of how we should actually define our theology ourselves. So, like today, many people teach many things, but the question is, what does it have to do with Torah? It's a very good question. Somebody comes, oh, you know this and this and that. What does it have to do with Torah? What does it have to do with my job as a disciple? What does it have to do with my calling? What does it have to do with my responsibility as a disciple? It's good. We should always ask this question. So, as disciples, our teaching and influence on the world, whether in words or deeds, should have everything to do with Torah. And for that, we have to learn to understand it according to its own value. And we will stop here for our reading of Hebrews. Next week, we'll start on Hebrews 10, which will take us back also, I believe, into the desert, Exodus. So now I guess we're ready to sing some songs.